For lunch, we're going to have TJ come up. He's with Saddle Butte Ag. So TJ attended the University of Minnesota with SECA and studied in sales and finance. While going to school, TJ worked for Festal Farms, which was a privately owned canning company in Owatonna, Minnesota, where he learned about production agriculture. Later on, TJ worked at a local feed mill and helped his uncle on the family farm. When they started using cover crops on the farm and saw the difference cover crops made, TJ knew he was hooked. TJ has first-hand experience on the farm that makes him an asset to local farmers. I've been working with TJ for about 2 years now, and we've done a lot of producer events, one-on-one events, and TJ is an excellent resource. So he's going to go over kind of cover crop 101, and then we're going to have time for question and answers. So if you guys think of something, write it down, so then at the end you can ask TJ those burning questions about forages and cover crops.
All right, thank you, Amy. I'm going to stand back here, and that way I don't get quite as animated and the lady who's trying to video us will catch everything. Otherwise, I'll be over there and back there and in that corner, and by the time it's done, you don't know where I'm at. So I'll stay up here. So Amy gave me a great introduction. Who am I? I wish Ted would stick around because I'm going to stress the crap out of you guys now. Because I'm going to tell you all these things that shouldn't work here, that's never worked here, that's going to work here. So Ted would be a great resource if he stuck around because I'll stress you guys to the max now. So who am I? So like Amy said, I grew up in Bloomberg Prairie, Minnesota. Does anybody know what Bloomberg Prairie is famous for? I'm getting close enough to the bold country where you probably remember a little football game we played a few years ago that we won, lost one, won one. We're the home of the Awesome Blossoms. So with that title being given to you when you're a young person, you got couple chances in life. You can go in an alternative lifestyle or you can get in ag, and I decided ag was a lot funner to be in an alternative lifestyle. But we're the third best known mascot in the U.S. right behind the Fighting Fairies, which is in California, and I don't know how that group plays a football against anybody because I don't know how you get anybody to play those guys. So I went to the University of Minnesota, like what Amy said. I should have hung around the agronomy and I should have hung around the horticulture people. Because at that time, they're learning how to feed plants, just not till, kill. And I took finance and sales because I thought, well, if nothing else, you can be a salesman. Because I graduated from high school in 1986. Does anyone remember what was happening in 1986? Ted talks about stress. That was stress. We were told to get as far away from the farm as we could. There was no future here. And down the road, we thought, well, who's going to farm? Get into sales. Well, I thought, well, who are you going to sell to if there's nobody farming? Who are we going to sell to? So we came back. My uncle stayed on the farm, battled through everything, ended up hanging on to what we could, built a pretty good sized operation there. It's not huge, about 900 acres, but it's very diverse now. We had cattle at one time. Kind of the funny part when you get to the cattle side is back in the 80s, we had a polled Hereford herd. So we let our bull go out to all local dairies for the first calf heifers, because they were smaller calves. Now VitaPlus calls that beef in-herd multiplication. You got to put a big title to it, something that we did years ago, we called it survival. And we raised alternative forages that time. We didn't know what it was, but we had set-aside ground and we took the oats off for forage. We didn't know what we were doing at all. It was just a crapshoot. But we fed cattle and it worked. But we didn't know what we were doing. Now we put fancy titles to it. So that's part of why I talk about this is everything we did back then we're still doing, we just have to have a title to it. So I started selling corn and soybeans in 1996 for Syngenta. It was NK at that time, and then we merged, and then in Black Monday they kicked us all to the curb, and I went to work for Legacy and a couple other small independent companies, and I kept selling seed corn. 2012 I started really getting into the cover crop side of it. 2009 I went to a meeting. 2012 I really got involved with it. And in 2014, I went to work for Saddle Butte. And the reason I made the change was everybody sold corn and soybeans. Every co-op sold corn and soybeans. Every local farmer was, I wanted to sell something different. And I believed that we can make a change out here because farther east, farther north, they're doing this all the time. They're making it work. And I thought, why can't we make it work? And in 2009, the first meeting we went to, the guy says, well, if you're north of I-80, it's a crapshoot. If you're north of 20 in Iowa, you won't make it work. And then we found a guy by the name of Gabe Brown up in Burleigh County, North Dakota. I found a guy named Daniel Bier north of Montreal. Now they farm with caribou and Eskimos up there. I mean, they're up in the frickin' frozen tundra of the world, and they're making cover crops work. I thought, well, if they can do it, some Canucks and a guy in North Dakota, we definitely make it work in Minnesota. And then everybody pushed back and said, well, we'll work here. It's too cold, it's too wet, it's too heavy to soils. I got this, there's too short a growing season. So I went to work for Saddle Butte because they had people on staff already that were making it work in areas, so I decided I could make it work. So I put this next map up. I'm right down the corner of the red square. We call it the Quad County area. It's Steele County, Dodge County, Moore County, and Freeborn County. So from my office in Blooming, I can throw a rock into Dodge County. I go a little south and I can throw it into Freeborn and Moore. So I'm right in the Quad County area. Why is this important in Minnesota? Right in Dodge County to the right of us, a quarter mile up at the county, is the start of the Cedar River watershed, which is over 1.5 million acre watershed. At the center of Steele County is the start of the Cannon River watershed, which is almost 800,000 acre watershed. We're the start of two major problems. All of our water goes to the Gulf. All of our sediment goes to the Gulf. All of our nutrients go to the Gulf. We've been at the Gulf and met with fishermen who can't do their jobs anymore because they can't get out past the barrier to fish, so they go to work for the commercial guys. Our practices have affected them downstream. That's something that bothers me a little bit, because I did not plan on doing anything in ag to affect somebody down the stream that would hurt them. And we do in a way. Now, that's nobody's fault. I don't sit there and say, well, you guys did this wrong and we did this wrong. No, it's just how we've evolved. But we can step back and fix the problem. It's not real complicated. We just have to make a few things happen. One is, first of all, you got to believe in your mind you can make it work. In your heart you can make it work. And then you get your hind end moving and it'll work. So, I mean, we can make this work. But that's why I put this picture. People say, where do you live? So how do we start? Start with something you can control. So I'm going to talk about that today. Learn from your mistakes. There's never a mistake out here. It's just something that didn't quite work right. But even when we do a mistake, we find some positive in it, or we find some way to say, well, don't do that again. We have made enough mistakes since 2012 that you don't have to make 90% of those mistakes. I'll tell you what we did. I think we know why it didn't work. Don't do that. But if you can do it and make it work, you tell me, because I'll rip you off and take it somewhere else and use it. I'll give you all the credit in the world that you figured it out, but I'm going to use it somewhere else in my trade area. As a company person, I cover 5-6 states. I cover Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, the Dakotas, and Wisconsin. I cover everywhere this should work, but we make it work. Look at markers in your field so you can see progress being made. All the work that Central Soda is doing on the mapping and the work with the soil health indicators are great, but there's little things you can see start to happen in your fields that will determine that you want to stay on this process. Yield maps. Everybody, how many people have yield mapping ability with their operation? Okay, there's a great point. You can overlay yield maps over the few years of starting to do this, over 5 years, and see progress being made. We got a map from one of my growers, 2012. He had a 17-acre piece on the other side of the ditch that 9.5 acres was under 15 bushel beans. Because since 12, he's added cover crops and no-till. He's got that area down to under an acre, and this year 2 inches less rain than in 12. Out of that 17 acres, only an acre was under 15 bushels, the rest was 35, 40 bushel beans. That's a positive. That's a marker he can see on his own without sharing with anybody, but he can see he's making progress on his operation. Network with other producers. I have an arsenal of people you can talk to if you want to talk to somebody besides me. I got guys that are big, small, intermediate. I got guys that are way advanced in this system. I got guys that are in their first couple, 3 years. Most of them are very willing to talk. The 2 farmers we have here right now are great guys to talk to. They're in the process of making this work. Excellent job what they're doing. And search out your own information. Google a lot of this stuff. We were just talking about videoing this and putting it on YouTube. I've had people come up to me in 2013 during the preventative plant years in southern Minnesota. We did a lot of YouTube videos. People still come up and go, I was watching your videos from 13 the other day, and I said, really? you know, you're a little skinnier then. I said, yeah, I know I was. I said, I didn't have as much gray hair either. I said, I've gotten older. That's, you know, that just happens. I've been married for almost 32 years. So, you know, you talk about stress. You know, I'm married to a short little bohemian gal that's a meat cutter. You talk about fire. When Ted said walking out of the room, she doesn't chase me anymore. She waits till I come back in and she's in there with the grinding wheel and the knife going, come on in, let's visit for a while. Done with the conversation right there. She's a banker now. She took a little 180, but she still's got their knives. She'd never give them up. So you talk about markers in the field. You know, we're trying to do the right thing on this side of the fence, but obviously the other side of the fence has decided that what we're doing is wrong. His sand smothers our cover crop. Trump wanted to build a wall. I said, just build it about 1/8 of a mile right there, I'll take care of it. Because I don't want his contamination on my farm. I'm a great neighbor, but I don't want that stuff. It's crappy sugar sand. In that side of the farm, the contract reads, plowed corn stalks, ripped soybean ground, or you won't farm my farm. Why? We're farming on this side using no-till cover crops, did some strip till to start on that farm, transitioned it. We would have the same thing happening there. It's the same soil, but it doesn't move because of the cover crop we're putting out all the time. I don't want his sand. We push it back on his side and it comes over every year. I called his daughter. She graduated from high school with me. I said, Vicki, I don't care who farms the farm, but we can help them do some things to protect your asset. I quit calling farmland several years ago. I call it an asset. Do you want an appreciated asset or depleted asset? I said, do you want your asset depleted? The first words out of her mouth was, you call my dad dumb? I said, I never called your dad dumb. You know, Ted talked about confrontation. My business is very confrontational at times. Oh, my dad was a poor farmer. I said, I never said any of those things, Vicki, to you. I said, I've grown up with you. We've known each other forever, rode the bus together. I said, I've never called your dad that. But I said, you're accusing me of calling him something just because I'm trying to protect your asset. I said, this conversation's over. Thanks. I'll call you. See you at the 4th of July. She comes home every year from Tennessee. I'd like to load that crap up and send to her yard in Tennessee and she can sit on it. Because I don't want it. I'm not trying to be mean. But that's not good. That's not good practices. That's not good. How many drive around and see this? We don't have an erosion problem. I think they do. That's flat ground by Hope, Minnesota. It is flat. No roll, no nothing. That was a 2.5-inch rain. Washed all that in the ditch. They came out with the backhoe, dug it out, and re-tilled the farm twice before they planted it, because that took care of it. They strip-tilled it one day when it was windy. You know what strip-tilling with a field cultivator looks like? They go 30 feet, they skip over 60, and go 30 feet again. So as the wind blows, it catches in the area. Then when that area dries up, they go strip-till in between. That's how they take care of that by Hope. The guy next to him cover crops and no-tills and has no problem. Same soil type. Raising a good crop and is very profitable. The one thing I have trouble with, the soil health conversations in the U.S. right now, the carbon conversations, the soil health conversations, the prevent the soil from eroding conversation. There's one word that never gets used in all these big speaking events and these big speakers: profitability. We have to stay profitable also. My job is to make the cover crops work for you. Amy's job is to make it work so you're positive on your farm, because if you're not here, she's not here, I'm not here, none of us are here. We got to stay profitable. This is not profitable, losing soil every single year. A farm right next to us just sold for $11,575 an acre with buyer premium. I had a picture on my phone. I didn't get it off in time, but I went down after the last big windstorm we had, and we had a bunch of that dirt blowing on my uncle's farm. Now that's a pretty good farm. We'll take that soil. I told him, I said, you should send the guy a thank you note and say, thanks for the $11,000, $575 an acre land. I appreciate it. Because we're not giving it back. No, it's on our side of the fence. I'll give the other stuff back, but I'm not giving that back. A little selfish, a little hypocritical on that part of it. But it's erosion. It's happening all the time. And we feel there's acceptable levels. This is not acceptable. We cannot keep doing this. We have to change a few little things, but stay profitable. That's the main thing. We got to stay profitable. So how to start? A great starting point is corn and soybean producers. Corn going to beans is a great starting point. Early corn silage or corn silage is an excellent point also. Too overwintering or non-overwintering. Some people like the overwintering aspect when they start. Other guys say, I really don't want it to overwinter. It scares me. I'm just not ready for that yet. We can put mixes together to do both that will satisfy equip contracts, CSP contracts. One thing I'll hit on right away is there's government money out there. Please go to these people and utilize it. And here's why. There's a bill that just got passed at the federal level that had $5 billion in it for cover crops, $35 an acre. Minnesota did not qualify. We're not going to get any of that money from the Fed. Iowa did, Dakotas did, Nebraska did, because we did not use enough program dollars to justify them giving us more money. That's too bad, because that was an easy program. We could have capitalized on that. The NRCS has no-till programs, cover crop programs, the SWCD does, watersheds, utilize all of them. I work with these programs all the time. I have the calculator tool on my computer at home. I run mixes constantly for guys. I can walk you through this thing. Amy can walk you through and make it such an easy transition that the office people just basically write you a check. And I tell you, that's awesome. I mean, we make their jobs easier to make your jobs easier to make it all work correctly. But please use those dollars. It's continuing education money. In agronomy, you guys got to take continuing ed classes, right? I have to take them and I have to pay for them. You guys have the opportunity to get anywhere from 25 to 35, 40, 50 bucks an acre to do continuing ed for 2 to 3. I have a grower in Dodge County who did a CSP contract to go to strip till. When that was up, he did a soil health assessment. He got 5 years of that. He'll have 8 years of that contract he got paid for to go from full tillage to strip till to cover crops to no-till soybeans. And he got a nice chunk of money on 900 acres to do that. That's great. Even if you don't get that big amount, utilize those dollars because it shows the Fed we're doing something. Someday, somebody will write a set of rules. And I guarantee you, remember when Ted said, did you lie to your parents about the beer party? You know what? I raised my hand pretty fast because you damn right I did. If I told my mom and dad the amount of booze I drank when I was a kid, they'd still be pissed off at me to today. But I did it. And I lied about it. You damn right I did. Am I happy I did it? Probably not. Did my kids lie to me? I'm sure they did. I know what they're doing. I told them straight out. You lie to me all you want. I know what you're doing. Don't BS me. I mean, I'm a salesman. I BS for a living. You are not going to get by me. I get it. So, utilize the dollars if you can. We can make it easy. But somebody will write rules, and you might not like the rules. So how we apply cover crops? Well, I should put on there how we haven't, because we've tried just about every application method out there. Started with planes, it really worked well. If you're going to use planes, find a guy who's an ag pilot, not just a pilot, that really understands the process of what they're utilizing, how they're flying it on, the species. It gets a little muddied when you start dealing with the different multi-mixes on how it works. We have a pilot in southern Minnesota that actually got very aggressive because he farms too, so utilizes covers. He laid out drop sheets and we flew over his runway and counted seeds per square foot on how to set his gates, so he got it right. There's a Ben Olson up in this area that does a lot of work. There's other, I think Wilmer Aviation does work. Helicopters, we've had good success and we've had okay success. The thing we found out was a fungicide in a helicopter, when it blows the canopy open, that's great. With cover crops, it can windrow it. We had a project in Iowa, a 7,000 acre project. They flew onto the helicopter and the guy sent me pictures of the most beautiful windrows of cover crops and then big bare strips and then windrows of cover crops and big bare strips. He was not real impressed with that application process. He stuck with it. We got some planes, we did some drills, we filled it in. We walked him through it. He likes what he's seeing, but that first experience probably would have turned 90% of the people off and said, I'm not doing this anymore. Vertical till of seed boxes have worked great. We're finding more and more guys putting those together. It's an excellent tool to use after harvest, after corn silage. We've had guys, if you have manure, if you're getting manure, this is always a conversation. What should I do? Two thought patterns. One is if the applicator can be right there behind the chopper, get it applied, VT in a cover crop. Two, if you can't get there, get the cover crop growing. Do not wait for the applicator. Let him run on that cover crop. He will cut some of it open. He will destroy some of it. We have found that stuff to heal and amend itself so fast you can't hardly tell he's been out there. Most of those applicators, if it's late in the year and they're running on a nice green ryegrass oat mix, they love that to death. Tires stay cleaner, kind of floats along, they got some soil structure. The manure is applied, and active growing cover crop scavenges up manure instantly. It's a great source to hold your manure. Inhibitors work well. Living plants are Mother Nature's ultimate inhibitor. She'll hold every ounce of that for the next year's crop. So I tell guys in southeastern Minnesota where I work with the big dairies, don't wait for the applicator. Get the cover crop established first. We have tried to seed into corn silage with planes and high clearance machines. Corn silage is a beautiful crop, but it's a big, thick canopy. We don't get as good as establishment under that. If you're getting it off from the 3rd week of August to the 2nd week of September, you got a whole opportunity to drill a whole different mix. So get the silage off first. Unless you do an early interseeding, I'll talk a little bit about that. And the same thing there, we've had kind of variations of results with that. No-till drills are great, but they are more expensive to operate. I'll tell you that right now, they are more expensive to operate. Just a drill. I have 3 guys right now that have bought 455 John Deere drills, the old box drills. They took out the center row, they pushed the rows over a little bit, 10-inch spacing. They're going right on each side of the old corn row. They're leaving a spot in the center to plant their beans in the next year. And they're using that, and it works great. They're using just rye, triticale, some winter camelina in that mix. Rye and trit can be planted later in the fall. Rye, all it has to do is get underneath the dirt and get covered up. The German saying is rye wants to see the sun and hear the bells. It doesn't have to be deep. As we get into November, we do drill it deeper just because we want to get it in a little bit warmer conditions and try to get it to germinate. Or not. I've drilled rye in the fall where it has not germinated at all, and it came up the next spring just fine. Rye, I think, would live through nuclear winter. I really believe that is almost the most foolproof, no-brainer crop to start with. But as we go forwards, there's catches with rye that we have to talk about. Light drags and rotary hoe work well. I got a grower by Austin, Minnesota. He's got an old fertilizer truck. He goes and spreads a mix after soybeans in the morning, combines in the afternoon, blows it on, rotary hoes it in, goes back combining beans in the afternoon. Gets a great catch out of it. Excellent job. Just enough little fluffing up and stirring, putting it under the residue works great. He's got an old hoe. I mean, that thing's kind of a pile of junk, but it works pretty good. What can we use cover crops for? Soil health is a great idea. Like I said, there's so many things you can do with it. You can graze it. You can forage it. Are you looking for weed suppression? We found great weed suppression with an overwintering cover crop. Water infiltration. I'll show some pictures in a little bit of why water filtration is so critical and what the cover crops do for this. Erosion control. I showed those pictures. That was flat ground, and it was eroding. I don't like to pick on the NRCS and stuff, but they've said a dime's worth of erosion on every acre is an acceptable level. That's close to 5 tons. I don't believe that's an acceptable number when you maybe don't have that many tons of topsoil left. We can't keep letting it leave the farm. It's got to stay where it belongs. What do we do? Okay, corn to beans. Winter cereal rye is a great starting point. It works well. It overwinters. It's easy to plant soybeans into. You terminate it down with glyphosate or a grass killer. It works really well. For a starting point with herbicide problems, canopy and everything, cereal rye is a great starting point. Unless you have wheat in your rotation. Do not use rye if you have wheat. You could ask my kids why. They got done walking 120 acres of wheat, winter wheat, that had rye sticking up out of it. And my daughter and youngest son walked and clipped the heads off the rye so you could combine the wheat and not get docked. I don't believe we could ever pay them enough to do that again. And in fact, if my daughter wasn't living at home and going to college and needed the money, and my son was 14, they neither one of them would have done it. And I sure wouldn't have done it, because I walked it one day with them and said, this is stupid. I got other stuff to do. So if you have small grains in your rotation, pick your battle. We used to raise both winter rye and winter wheat at home. I work with a group out of South Dakota, and the guy told me, he says, raising 2 overwintering crops, different ones, are like sleeping with 2 women. You'll catch something from one, take to the other, and both will be mad at you. And that is the truth. Rye back to wheat isn't as bad, or wheat back to rye isn't as bad, but rye with wheat in it, they'll reject and beat you up terrible. So you won't get rid of it. So just, if you're gonna use winter wheat in your rotation, spring wheat in your rotation, you have to pick your overwintering cover crops. Rye is not one. Triticale, I'll put it this way, we've done that before and they don't catch it because trit's got part wheat in it and it doesn't show up on the test. I didn't tell you that. Don't tell grain millers or anybody I said that. But it doesn't show up as easy. So knock on wood, we haven't been caught yet. I'm sure this video will go out and I'll get my ass chewed for this. So whatever, they can call me up. They call me and squawk at me about other stuff I say too. So interseeding into corn might be a long-term plan. Beans to corn. We have made that work well, but it is more an advanced program. You got to manage that in the spring better. We have had some hiccups with it. We dinged a corn yield one year, and I'll tell you straight up, we planted some earlier family corns, like 93-day down earlier family corn. For a food grade company we used to have in Blooming in Hope, it was called Sun Opta, and then it went to something else, and now it's broke. And I won't get on that, but it's kind of irritating because they took a lot of people for a ride. But anyways, we had a food grade market there. We raised this earlier corn. 2 years in a row, it was 225 bushel corn. We had big rye cover crop in front of it. We planted that corn, 125 bushel corn on 160 acres. It took 100 bushel off. And here's why. Earlier families' corns require a lot. We work with a corn breeder that sold us this variety. He told us this. Earlier family corn require a lot of sunlight at the time of emergence. The rye was too tall. We didn't terminate it, get laid down. It shaded it out. You could walk through the field and he sent us a picture of what it looked like. You'd have a big ear, 4 little ears. Big ear, 3 little ears. Big ear, 6 little ears. That's exactly what that corn looked like. You could, in the picture he sent, you walk through the field. At that point, when I'm riding with my uncle is, the crap you sold me screwed up my corn. Now at that time it was his and my corn together, but it wasn't my corn anymore. It was the crap I sold him goofed his corn up. You know, it's hard enough when you sell to somebody you don't know. When you sell to family and piss them off, it's really a lot of fun with that conversation. Christmas is a really great time because all you do is say, remember when you, yeah, I remember. Ted talked about not bringing things up. My uncle's Dane and he doesn't let anything die. 10, 12 years down the road, he's still telling me, remember 15 years ago when you did that? Yeah, God, it's 15 years, man. It's over. The machinery's sold. What are you worried about? But he remembers stuff. Interseeding and then frost seeding. If you haven't done anything, we've had guys frost seed in the spring and it works really well. We've used red clover, we use oats, we use annual ryegrass. We've done frost seeding and it works well. Here's us flying by Bloom Prairie. Like I said, you can see in the background, the turbines. We have turbines in our country. I asked the aerial applicator, I said, does a turbine scare you? And he goes, well, can you see it? I go, yeah. He goes, well, I can too. He said, what scares me is the wind around it. He said, because it changes the weather pattern or the wind pattern. Our company will actually break these for fungicide application. And now, because of the carbon footprint, they'll let us break them to seed cover crops. That was kind of an interesting conversation when they said, well, are you putting covers by the turbines? Yeah. Is there carbon credits available to buy? Well, I don't know why. Well, we could break them if you're flying by the turbines. So they shut them down for a couple hours and let us fly by. So they will work with you if you talk to them. So we flew it on. This is what it looked like in the fall. I put this picture up here for a couple reasons. We were ridge tillers since 1987 to 2014. We ridge tilled. What do you think's happening out here with these streams? You can see right where the ridges were, where we over-fertilized for years. Because we deep placed all our fertility with a deep placement machine for 12 years on grids. I think we had a little bit more nitrogen in some areas than we needed. So it was a marker for us that we were over applying and our crop was not utilizing everything that was out there for us. Now this did. This is when your neighbors think you've lost your screws. When you're planting into this, they literally think you're smoking everything you're raising. You can't be making this work. You can't be raising this. I put this slide up for a couple reasons. One is you can see the roll of the ground here. This is a 3.5 acre piece that it's a 400-acre farm that we run right around my building site. All the water naturally sheds to this area. There's a big inlet. Well, you can see the inlet right there. All right, it's got a big tile main running through it that has 1,200 acres on the other side of this farm that feeds to that main. It's a 36-inch main that goes through that farm to a ditch over here. We started tiling. We tiled this entire farm. We did a total tile project from 2005 to 2009. We tiled every acre, pattern tiled all my uncle's farms. He spent the money. He said, I'm done with this. We had a big wet spot out here we didn't farm for 6-8 years. They're going to declare it wetland if we didn't get it tiled. They let us tile it. Our guy was easy to work with because we were going to stick with the ridge till, and he knew we were going to advance it into something else. I put this up here for a couple reasons. We used to lose crop in this 9 out of 10 years. Since we started covering and no-tilling, we have water pond there for a day. We haven't lost a crop in 7 years in there. Some of the wettest years we've had. Not just because of the infiltration of water here, the infiltration of the water in the entire farm. Yes, the tile helped, but after we got done tiling, this still drowned it out. For 2-3 years after, until we switched our practices and added covers, reduced our tillage, and made our ground a sponge like it used to be. So it would infiltrate, not pond. We did a Russell II study, which you can ask the government people, is a watershed of how much water will run down into an area. There was 3-4 million gallons of water would come down in here off a 2 to 3 inch rain. We don't have that anymore because the entire farm infiltrates. Our last infiltration ring that we ran was 6.5 inches of rain in an hour. We can hold on this farm. We have a woods that's on this farm. It's a 3-acre piece that has not been tilled forever. You can't dump water in that fast dump. It just goes. I think that thing could probably 30-40 inches an hour in that woods. Our ground is not there, probably never be there, but 6.5 inches of rain in an hour or 5.5 inches is a lot of rain. We can hold a lot of water on that farm. Where is that beneficial? In a wet year? Where is it beneficial in a dry year? You get an inch of rain really fast. Ours goes in the tank. How many times do you guys get an inch of rain in a drought time and half that goes over the top or 3/4 that goes over the top and washes? Ours goes in the tank, so it's there for the crop. So that's a big part of this. That's why I put this up here. That, and my uncle gives these guys that sit at a table in the coffee shop crap because they're so worried about his farm that he sleeps good at night because they're more worried about than he has to be. So when we planted that day, he told them, you should come out and watch me. I should have charged admission. I should have set up at both ends of the road and charged them. Because I think 25, 30 times they drove by shaking their heads. This won't work. One of them is the guy who has the farm that erodes on us too. And he is the biggest complainer about this way we farm. It's a dirty way to farm. You're lazy farmers. That's fine. I'm lazy. I'll tell everybody I'm lazy. Look at the size of me. You think I work pretty hard? I'm not a dairy guy, I can tell you that. Those guys are nuts. I'm with Ted. You guys do a lot of work. I mean, I appreciate every dairy guy, man. You guys do a lot of work, but none of you look like me because you work too hard to look like me. When we did it on Monday, people asked about spraying behind us. We usually have them a day behind us. This time they got right on our ass and actually passed us. Where they passed us and we planted into what they sprayed, we did have some escapes. And we figured what we did was we split the crowns open on the rye and we did not let the herbicide get into the root system to kill it. I had a grower this year, 300 acres of cereal rye, going to corn. He manages it well, he has manure, plenty of nitrogen up front, so he manages it well. Went around at the VT and just did the headland, 60 feet, just to smooth them out. Sprayed that 2 more times to get that rye to die. The rest of the farm died. After you use a herbicide pass, do not go in there for at least a week, week and a half. Let the herbicide do its job. Let it get into the root network and kill it. If you split it open, this stuff will come back and it's mean when it comes back. It's mad and pissed off. Don't do that. Let it die because it works. It does a great job for you. And look at that, the beans grow. They grow just fine. One thing about no-till and cover crops, my wife's grandfather, 100% Bohemian, used to have a saying, ugly in the cradle, pretty at the table. No-till and cover crops is ugly till July 4th. Corn, beans, I don't care what it is, it's ugly. Doesn't look good, the neighbors looks better, everybody's sick about it, looks terrible, and then July 4th kicks in, And everything kind of makes this turn, and it just starts to really look great. And it really, from there on, just pounds. And I think part of it is we get into those drier cycles at that point, and you got all this extra in the tank, you got this armament, you're keeping your ground cooler. You talk about biology and ground cooling. We have lysimeters in the ground who keep track of the ground temperature through the NRCS and SWC office. We have never gotten over 92 degrees, or 94 degrees at 2 inches. Our neighbors is up to 140, 150 degrees at surface. What happens at 104 degrees? Your soil shuts down, your water's respirating out, you're burning your ground, you shut your biology down. Our stuff doesn't do that. Life begins at 40, ends at 40. 40 Celsius or 40 Fahrenheit is the kick-in of life. 40 Celsius, which is 104 degrees, life stops. And that's what happens here. We keep it cooler. We keep it armored. We keep it protected. We only sprayed, we burned this down. On the other side where we had the corn, we had to spray it twice. This we sprayed once. We never put bug juice on it. The aphids were never that bad. I'm not saying it's just because of the rye, but I think the predators. This farm has that tendency of white mold and cyst nematode. We don't have any of those issues anymore because we prevent the water from splashing up and putting the spores on the bean plants. So we plant a cyst-resistant bean, and it really does its job because we're helping eliminate the cyst by the cereal rye.
Did you plant any later in the spring? Because what you're saying with the heat kind of works the opposite in the spring. With germination, your soil's going to be a lot cooler, isn't it?
Ours is warmer. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't at all, does it? And I'll tell you this story why. There's a guy in Wisconsin. Those guys farm ground that none of us, if you gave it back to the Indians, they would have starved. They farm pretty bad ground. So there's a guy started this temperature. He's the first guy to do the work on temperatures in the spring with covers. So he had half his farm with covers, half his farm fully tillage. He and his wife were mowing lawn, the end of April, 1st of May in snowmobile suits. Cold as hell. They're eating lunch. Now this is where a man doesn't ever admit a woman knows anything. She says, I got a question for you. Why is the cereal rye growing and looking good and the lawn's growing, but where you did all that tillage to promote warming, there's nothing growing? Doesn't mean anything. Gets done eating, gets a soil thermometer and a temp gun. Went out in the lawn was 48 degrees. The cereal rye was 44 degrees. The bare ground was 31 degrees at 2 inches. The soil was alive with microbial life, and it was starting to grow already, and the soil was warmer. Those lysimeters I talked about we have in the ground, we showed in the spring. Our neighbor's farm at tillage went from 42 degrees at 2 inches to 104 degrees at 2 inches after tillage. Our ground was 44 degrees. We got a cold rain 2 days later. Ours went back 1 degree. His dropped back down to 38 degrees because it's alive. It's growing. The biology's working. And that's not what we've been taught. That's why I told you Ted should stick around, because I'm going to stress the hell out of you with what I'm going to say. But that does work. If you go out and check temperatures, and I have a whole series where every Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning, I went and checked ours compared to the neighbors with just a soil temperature, stuck it in the ground at 2 inches, walked straight across Highway 30 into the neighbors, full tillage. And the variation was 12 to 15 degrees difference at 2 inches with a cover crop growing versus bare soil, which is completely opposite what we've been taught over the course of the years, isn't it? So, yeah, growing active soil is warmer. And that is one of the hardest things to wrap your head around when you start doing this. Because you feel no-till and covers, it's got to be colder. It's got to be colder, and it's warmer. And I don't know if you guys have ever done those, put those lysimeters in that they take like thousands of readings a day. You can have charts that come out your ears, but it really shows how warm that ground is. And just a soil thermometer and going in once a week at the same time and putting that in the ground will prove it to yourself. You can do that with nobody watching. Just go do it yourself. But it is a big difference. And I got you thinking, don't I? You're thinking, he's nuts. This guy is a little.
I think part of that is why, the whole different, I spent 2 days down at the soil health clinic for the U of M. They didn't even talk about that, okay? I think part of it is, if you want to do corn on corn, we're told, get it black to get it warmed up.
Yep.
And that's why we're all sitting there going, and it's gotta be because, like you said, if the biology is getting going sooner,
Yep.
and that's the difference.